I'm very glad to chair the 2023 Finance Ministers meeting here in San Francisco over the past 2 days. And the United States has been proud to host APEC throughout this year. Hosting APEC is one of the many ways the Biden administration is broadening and deepening our economic ties across Asia-Pacific economies. APEC economies are at the center of the global economy and our world's economic future. The United States' engagement with other APEC economies strengthens the U.S. economy, benefits American workers and firms, and advances American interests. It's bringing significant benefits to the region as well. And cooperation across APEC economies is also key to tackling the challenges we all face, including the urgent threat of climate change. Over the past year, APEC members have advanced our shared vision of an open, dynamic, resilient, and peaceful Asia-Pacific region through finance track engagements. And today's Finance Ministers meeting allowed us to cement progress on key priorities, from monitoring macroeconomic and financial developments in the region and globally, to advancing our approaches to regulation of digital assets, sustainable finance, and inclusive growth-oriented policies consistent with what I've called modern supply-side economics. I'll start there. APEC members have affirmed a shared interest in pursuing policies that expand the productive capacity of our economies while also achieving outcomes like reducing inequality and protecting the environment. In the United States, we're doing this through an historic trifecta of legislation: President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law, CHIPS Act, and Inflation Reduction Act. I'm pleased that other APEC economies recognize the potential of this strategy and are pursuing similar policies, including ones that support research and development, invest in infrastructure, and drive labor force participation. We've also aligned on the importance of addressing global challenges. Our joint work centers on unlocking the flow of sustainable finance, including through exploring ways to drive the development of credible climate commitments and to create effective and high-integrity voluntary carbon markets. We also agree that engagement with the private sector is critical, as is engagement with international financial institutions. The Biden administration's efforts to accelerate the transition to a net zero economy range from our launch of the Principles for Net Zero Financing and Investment to our call to evolve the multilateral development banks, to our support for the transition to clean energy in economies including Indonesia and Vietnam through just energy transition partnerships. Our discussions have revealed the ways other APEC members are also pursuing meaningful work. There's also commitment to continued work on the responsible development of digital assets, where many APEC economies are leading the way. We see increasing adoption of digital asset technologies across the region and note their potential to increase financial inclusion and reduce the cost of cross-border transactions. We also recognize that digital asset technologies carry risks and appreciate the need for proper regulation and other strategies to manage those risks. Of course, chairing the APEC Finance Ministers meeting is only one aspect of the United States' much broader commitment to deepening our engagement across the Asia-Pacific region. As one example, Treasury is actively engaged in the ongoing work to reach a substantial conclusion of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. This would be a monumental achievement for IPEF members, addressing issues from climate change to supply chain security. And since IPEF members collectively account for 40% of global GDP, it would be significant for the global economy as well. Responsibly managing the U.S.-China economic relationship has also been a key priority throughout my time in San Francisco. As you know, I met with Vice Premier He Lifeng, my Chinese counterpart, here last week, and I had a productive meeting with China's new finance minister, Lan Foan, this week. President Biden and I believe strongly in advancing the values we share with our allies and partners in the Asia-Pacific and beyond, while also pursuing a healthy and stable economic relationship with China. Going forward, we hope to build on the foundation we have laid to further deepen communication, stabilize the relationship, and make progress on key issues. There's hard work ahead of us, but I believe our engagements here have moved us along the right path. As the United States nears the end of a productive APEC host year, I'm impressed by all we have collectively accomplished across our priority areas. We congratulate Peru on its upcoming host year and look forward to supporting its work. And through APEC and otherwise, the United States will remain committed to deepening our economic ties with the Asia-Pacific. Advancing our shared vision is crucial to the success of Asia-Pacific economies, and it supports jobs, growth, and resilience at home in the United States as well. Now I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, everyone. We'll start with Victoria Dendrinu from Bloomberg.
Thank you. Hi, Secretary. I wanted to ask you about U.S. debt.
About what?
Sorry? About U.S. debt. Moody's a few days ago lowered its outlook on the debt, and they cited, in part political dysfunction, but also debt affordability. I was just wondering, given that we're less than a week away from a potential shutdown and we're seeing interest costs soar still, do you think they're right in being concerned about these two things? And then more broadly, regarding the potential shutdown next week, I'm just wondering, and especially given the U.S. role these days, if you're concerned that it diminishes the credibility of the U.S. as its leadership. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Let me start with the Moody's decision. They maintained the U.S. AAA rating, but indicated that there's a negative outlook. This is a decision that I disagree with. The American economy is fundamentally strong, and Treasury securities remain the world's preeminent safe and liquid asset. We have enjoyed over the past several years an historically fast economic recovery from a deep recession. Our unemployment rate is near historic lows. Inflation has come down significantly, and our economy grew by almost 5% in the third quarter. Now, it's true that resilient U.S. economic growth has been a factor pushing up interest rates recently. That's something that reflects the fundamental strength of the U.S. economy, not weakness. Now, it is true that higher interest rates, if they last, do create a challenge, an additional challenge to debt sustainability. The President and I are completely committed to a credible and sustainable fiscal path. The President has signed into law $1 trillion over the next decade in deficit reduction. We've made very meaningful investments that will raise our tax collections by investing in the Internal Revenue Service. and put in place a corporate minimum tax, lowered spending on prescription drugs. And the president has proposed an additional $2.5 trillion of deficit reduction over the next decade, in addition to what's already been done and the reductions in the bipartisan agreement earlier this year. You asked about the potential shutdown, and I would simply say that given the strides that I just described and the strength of the U.S. economy, a shutdown is something that poses an unnecessary economic headwind in a moment when the U.S. economy is doing well and moving in the right direction. So it's critical that House Republicans do their job and work in a bipartisan manner so we sustain this progress. I know that discussions are active in Congress on trying to find a path forward, and the administration is engaging closely in discussions with Congress. I'm hopeful we'll find a satisfactory solution.
Thank you. Let's go to Andy Duran, Wall Street Journal next.
Hi, Secretary Yellen. I wanted to ask about the Chinese economy and I guess concerns about the possibility or the fact that Chinese exports are increasing and that exports could increase dramatically as they manage their economic situation. There are already signs that in certain clean energy sectors there's been huge increases in exports from China and flooding global markets. Is that something that APEC discussed today or should discuss this week? And is that becoming a more urgent concern for you and for the United States? And is there anything that the U.S. Should do or is contemplating doing in response to Chinese export dumping?
So this really was not something that APEC discussed in great detail, although we did talk about the slowdown in the Chinese economy, and I think agreed that it presents a downside risk to the economic outlook that could affect probably not so much the United States, but many APEC economies that have deep trade relations. Certainly in my bilateral discussions with the Vice Premier, we did talk about issues of oversupply that have arisen and could arise in the future in industries that China is investing in very heavily. And I do consider that a risk. We both endorse the notion that we should have a level playing field, fair trade relations, and to the extent that some of the investments in these industries reflect China channeling financial resources to firms that produce in these industries, and that there could result in overcapacity. That is an issue that we talked about and that I think they understand.
Thank you. Let's take the next question. Dave Lauder, Reuters.
Hi, thank you, Secretary. You mentioned in your remarks the IPEF discussions that are going on alongside this APEC conference, and so that this could be a monumental event if it were to reach a substantial conclusion. And I wanted to ask you whether you felt that you expect there to be a substantial conclusion during this week, particularly on the trade side of things, or if this is something that might take a bit longer to come to fruition. Thank you.
So my understanding is that very substantial progress has been made on 3 of the 4 pillars, and on the trade pillar, there's also been negotiations taking place for quite some time, that there's been significant progress, but it looks not to be complete, like something that is likely to require further work. Nevertheless, in a number of areas that I think are critically important to the United States, like supply chains, and the environment, sustainable finance. We've made a huge amount of progress, and we've made progress on trade too, but it appears not to be complete.
Thank you. Let's go next to Rintaro Tabita, Nikkei.
Thank you for choosing me. I would like to ask about U.S. economic involvement in the Indo-Pacific region.
In the where?
Indo-Pacific region. Today, IPEF ministers failed to reach agreement on the trade pillar. How do you expect to demonstrate U.S. economic involvement in the trade field in this region? Thank you.
Well, first, as I indicated, I think that substantial progress has been made on the trade pillar, although there appear to be remaining issues. But look, the United States has been working to deepen our relationship with countries in the APEC region for quite some time in many different ways. Our chairmanship of APEC this year is one of the ways. All the work that has gone into the meetings that we have held here is one way in which we have deepened ties. We are deepening our trade and investment ties. This is something that's good for the United States and also good for countries in the APEC region. We're working constructively on supply chain issues, deepening our relationships. Just during my time as secretary, I visited, I believe, 6 APEC countries, and in places like Vietnam, Indonesia, we're deepening our supply chain relationships. Some of this is through IPEF, but some is through bilateral discussions as well. And we're working very constructively together on climate change, which is a concern that is shared by all the economies in the APEC region. And we've done a lot of work to address it jointly, and working with the multilateral development banks. We had a lunch today with ABAC, met with representatives of the private sector. Many financial institutions have voluntarily taken on net zero commitments. We've engaged in discussions about how the public and private sector can work together in our economies to promote sustainable investment. We're deeply involved in JETPs, or Just Energy Transition Partners, with Vietnam and with Indonesia. So there is a great deal that has been taking place to deepen our relationships.
Thank you. We'll take the last question. Amr Mudni, AP.
Excuse me. Thank you, Secretary. To what extent did you hear from your counterparts here at APEC about the U.S. response to the Israel-Gaza conflict? And at this point, how concerned are your counterparts about how this conflict could potentially cause serious tumult to the global economy?
Well, we did talk about risk to the global economic outlook, and I believe there was a strongly shared view that it's important for all of us to work to do everything we can to contain the conflict between Israel and Hamas, so that it doesn't become a broader regional conflict, that if it does, it could pose risks to the global outlook that all of us would be concerned about. And I think the general view is that we've not seen, this suffering that's taking place because of this atrocity against Israel and all of the suffering in Gaza and the need for humanitarian aid. That's top of mind, I believe, for all of us. We've not really seen yet much economic impact from what's happening, but we are concerned and broadly view it as critical not to see the conflict expand.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes the press conference.